For decades, Hollywood has deified men with inhumanly massive physiques. But then, just a few years later, those once chiseled like stone bodies suddenly deflated, withered, and their faces aged so fast they were barely recognizable. Experts have issued a stark warning. This is the devastating consequence of steroids, the substance once regarded as the secret key to creating those many hyper-realistic bodies. There was one actor so obsessed with steroids, he felt he couldn't live without them. Another used hormones right on the movie set, with the entire crew complicit in covering up everything to maintain his hero image on the silver screen. Still others stood before millions of viewers, swearing their bodies were completely natural, until they were dragged to court and forced to confess that they had been using steroids like drinking water for years. Who are the leading men on this list? Prepare yourself, because the following roster will expose the stars that steroids didn't just build into legends, but ultimately destroyed their bodies forever. 1. Clint Walker, the tragedy of the fake Western hero. Before becoming a Western icon, Clint Walker was no legendary cowboy. He was just a big but ordinary guy, working simple manual jobs, sweeping airports, laboring, and bouncing at a bar in Texas. He once described himself, big but ordinary. Yet just a few years after stepping into Hollywood, Walker's body underwent an unbelievable transformation. Standing 6'6" and possessing nearly superhuman proportions, shoulders almost a yard wide, a chest circumference of 52 inches, and biceps so large he had to have custom shirts made. The remarkable thing was that Walker always asserted he only did manual labor and occasionally lifted homemade concrete weights in his youth. However, based on his gigantic physique and extraordinary strength, the press painted a hyper-real image. Walker was said to be able to effortlessly lift a co-star weighing nearly 200 pounds, and even once stopped two stuntmen charging into each other with a single arm. Through media campaigns, they portrayed a hero who had stepped out of a legend. But the reality was nothing like the narrative Hollywood constructed. According to revelations from some crew members, throughout the 8 seasons of Cheyenne, Walker was constantly suffering injuries, muscle strains, back pain, and even multiple real falls during action scenes. To keep the schedule on track, he was forced to work while exhausted. More alarmingly, he was allegedly required to use various strength-enhancing drugs to help maintain his muscles. And despite enduring so many terrible things, Walker never publicly admitted to using steroids to the media. However, industry experts point out many signs. The pattern of chest and shoulder muscle development far surpassing his legs, a common characteristic of synthetic testosterone users, his ability to maintain muscle mass throughout long filming periods, and an unusually fast recovery rate. To protect Walker's image, Hollywood chose to conceal every trace. They strictly controlled his visuals and promoted him as a natural hero. Although Walker gradually stepped away from the cinematic limelight in the late 60s, the control was tightly maintained. He became the gold standard for natural masculinity that subsequent generations of action actors were expected to emulate. The irony is that, due to his dependence on strength-enhancing drugs, Walker had a very different post-Hollywood life. He focused on roles that were less physically demanding and stayed away from the noise. Nevertheless, every time he appeared in public, Walker still had to play that legendary hero. He never broke the wall of silence that Hollywood had built around him, ultimately becoming a victim of the very image he once helped create. 2. Steve Reeves, the studio's mandate, and the heavy price of becoming Hercules. Before becoming the greatest Hercules on screen, Steve Reeves was fortunate enough to possess a naturally beautiful physique. But the very pressure to maintain that God-given gift pushed him onto a path Hollywood calls the most horrific in the world. In 1957, when director Pietro Francisci was searching for an actor to play Hercules, he wanted something not quite human. The man chosen was Steve Reeves. And when Reeves signed the contract, the studio issued a strange mandate. Your body is a product. You must maintain it at all costs. In the 1950s, anabolic steroids began to sneak into the American bodybuilding scene. A trainer at Muscle Beach whispered to Reeves, "There's a drug that will help you keep your muscle mass even when filming 14 hours a day." Reeves initially refused. He believed in pure, natural strength. But the demands from the studios grew relentless. The body had to be bigger, the shoulders wider, and absolutely no drop in form was allowed. That pressure drove Reeves to a harsh decision. He would use steroids on his own body. In less than 6 months, Reeves appeared on camera with a distinctly different physique. His muscles were more swollen, his arms increased in circumference. His skin was taut and glossy, a clear sign of water retention from synthetic testosterone. Everything changed so fast that the crew exclaimed, "His body changed too quickly, like a deflating balloon." What the public never saw was that when the lights turned off, Steve Reeves began to suffer pain, chronic shoulder aches, frequent muscle strains, irregular heartbeat, and increased blood pressure. Doctors at the time simply blamed it on overwork, but Reeves knew his body had been permanently altered. He felt his breathing was heavier, his sleep more restless, and his injuries recovered slower after each shoot. After age 40, the consequences became apparent: a rapid decline in strength and debilitating back pain. And it was this tragedy that led Steve Reeves to permanently withdraw from the spotlight. He and his wife moved to a quiet ranch in Oregon. There, he dedicated his time to healing. Reeves began to deeply research natural fitness, developing a nutrition and exercise regimen he called power walking. He transformed his painful experience into a mission. He used the very story of his ravaged body to warn the next generation about the price of unnatural strength. True health is not in size, but in sustainability. 3. Sylvester Stallone, the fountain of youth and the scandal of being caught at the Australian airport with dozens of hormone vials before becoming the legendary Rambo. Sylvester Stallone was just an unknown actor, scraping by with small roles and hoping one day Hollywood would notice him. When Rocky unexpectedly became a phenomenon, the spotlight immediately locked him into the mold of the Steel Man. To maintain that image, Stallone began to transform himself into a fighting machine, 6-hour daily workouts, and extreme diets. But then, there was an enemy that even a steel will couldn't defeat: time. The pressure to keep his massive physique, to be bigger, stronger, to compete with younger stars, pulled Stallone into a vortex of exhaustion. And right when he was at his weakest, the producers handed him what they called the elixir, along with a tempting promise: use it. It will make you a legend. And that was when Stallone stepped into the greatest secret of his life. Nearly 3 decades later, in 2007, that secret was horrifyingly exposed. Stallone was caught by police at an Australian airport with dozens of vials of hormone. The press immediately swarmed like wolves. They criticized him for being fake and dishonest. But on media, Stallone still responded nonchalantly: "It's my secret, and it's the fountain of youth." However, the effects of the drugs were still visible on him. While filming Rambo 4, some crew members whispered that he looked no longer human. His body was oversized, his face stiffened like wax, and his eyes were filled with despair. The more hormones he used, the stranger and more unnatural Stallone's body became. On some days, Stallone reportedly used them right on set just to ensure his appearance for the camera. Finally, in an interview, Stallone admitted in a heavy voice, "I had to do what was necessary to compete. I was too helpless." That was the final confession of a legend who fought and lost the battle against the laws of nature, becoming a tragic victim of the very Steel Man image he desperately sought to create. 4. Arnold Schwarzenegger, the pioneer of the hyper-realistic era and the fracture from within. Long before becoming the governor of California, Arnold Schwarzenegger was one of the strongest men in the world. He was once a lanky, thin teenager with only average muscle mass. But in just a few short years, his body transformed strangely. His biceps grew from 35 centimeters to nearly 55 centimeters, a rate that modern experts call unnatural. Immediately afterward, Arnold stepped onto the stage bathed in dazzling glory. Cameras idolized his muscles. Flashlights treated him like a god. Every shoulder turn, every flex of the bicep, every proud, curved smile from Arnold seemed to affirm, "I am perfect." And to make everything more dazzling and grandiose, Arnold decided to venture down the path of steroids. He always asserted that everything was under strict medical supervision, and at the time it was legal and even necessary to reach the unprecedented peak of bodybuilding. It was a cold, sharp justification for challenging natural limits. And the consequence was that nothing came for free. Arnold had to endure the transformation and devastation of the very body that was once his monument. There were successive surgeries, harsh signs of premature aging, and irreversible damage. His voice in interviews changed, deeper, slower, less fiery than the muscle hero image of the past, and finally becoming incredibly weak, a reminder that even the man made of steel could not deceive biology.